If you fire your car mechanic because you think he's not giving you a good deal, or every time he makes a fix, it doesn't work, then you ought to probably consider that with your doctor if he's also not doing that for you as well. There are great people practicing medicine in this world, but medicine as a system, I think, is largely broken.
Jared St. Clair is an herbalist, supplement formulator, and wellness educator. He is the host of the Vitality Radio podcast, answering listener questions on supplements, gut health, hormones, emotional resilience, and protective lifestyle strategies.
If you were to send me an email, so I didn't see you, I had no idea what your age was or your gender or your health status at all, and you said, Jared, I'm simply only willing to take one supplement, what would it be? Then that answer would actually be...
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity podcast. Our next guest has been consulting with people on the best supplements to support their health for 37 years. Actually, it's probably longer. This hands-on experience comes by way of Vitality Nutrition, a well-known health store in Utah. Jared St. Clair is an herbalist, supplement formulator, and wellness educator. He is the host of the Vitality Radio podcast, answering listener questions on supplements, gut health, hormones, emotional resilience, and protective lifestyle strategies. He has been doing this to the tune of 543 episodes. It's probably more now. He's probably got some in the can. His goal is to educate listeners on mastering natural supplements to thrive without pharmaceuticals, making him a leading voice in holistic health. His LinkedIn profile says, I love what I do and I take my job very seriously. Laughing and smiling all the way. Hopefully today with this episode, we can share both smiles and laughter, as well as share valuable insights into great supplementation practices. Jared, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm really excited, Chris. This is going to be a fun show.
All right. So now, before we jump into your area of expertise, you mentioned I've given you some questions you never heard before. Here's one that you've never heard before. I want to go further back. I actually want to go much further back. What was it like growing up, little Jared? Where did you grow up? What were your parents like? And if there was some event or someone you could pinpoint as the reason you would ultimately become a natural health advocate and podcast host, what or who would that be?
Well, it'd definitely be my father, because he got started in the health food industry as I think it was an assistant manager. This is before I was born, and I'm 52 now, so we're going way back. But an assistant manager of a health food store that I believe has been long gone in Tucson, Arizona. They had another one in Phoenix, Arizona. I believe he worked at both of those. As I recall, it was called New Life, like Nulife, health foods. Now, again, I wasn't born yet. My older brothers were just barely around at that point. He got the bug. He loved the whole idea of natural and clean eating, and it really stuck with him. And from that day forward, he worked there for 2 years. He then went on to work for a company called Albion. Albion was really the foremost leader in chelating minerals back when mineral chelates were just becoming a thing. And I still think does the best chelation work in the world right now. And that brought him to Utah, which is where we are now. Albion is just a stone's throw from where we're at here at Vitality Nutrition. And from there, he ended up being a vice president at multiple different pretty well-known supplement companies, Mega Food, Solaray, Nature's Herbs, quite a few big ones. And that's what he did for the majority of his career until he decided to open up his own business, which is still thriving. He's gone now, but his business that he started is Ridgecrest Herbals. And they're a pretty well-known company that's in most health food stores across the country. And 48 years ago this August, he decided that he wanted to open up a family health food store. And I was 5 at the time, and they opened this place. It was frankly a terrible decision financially at the time. Nobody cared about health food stores back in 1977. There was barely a health food industry in 1977. And yet he had two goals that he shared with me later. He wanted a place where he could get the quality products that he wanted to feed his family and at wholesale. So there you go. And then he wanted a place where his kids could work and learn the stuff that he felt was important for them to learn. And that's how Vitality Nutrition was born. And as I said, I was 5 years old. I was in and out of the store a little bit as a kid. At the age of 7, I actually started working there on a regular basis. I'd come in after school on a couple days a week, and on Saturdays, just, dumping the garbage and all that stuff, labeling products. But by the time I was 15, he made me the store manager, and I started managing the store after school on Saturdays. And when I was 22, I bought the place. And so it couldn't possibly be more in my life's blood than it is.
Man, that's awesome. So many things are driven by like, I want quality products. So some people will go out and formulate. In your dad's situation, he did a bad business deal and opened a natural food products. Like that's how much he wanted access to quality products at a good price. Can you think back? Were there conversations you had where like, oh, I know stuff that my peers just don't know at all? And did they even go like, oh, you're the crazy granola guy? Did you have some of those experiences early on?
For sure. My dad was always the thing that I admire the most about my father is that he did not care what you thought about him. It just didn't matter to him. He was never the people pleasing type at all, and was going to do what he wanted to do. His gravestone, the quote, "I did it my way" from Frank Sinatra is on his headstone, and that's how he lived his life. And as such, we went to a little tiny private school. We had to ride the city bus for an hour and 15 minutes to get to this little school because he didn't like government schools. And we had a little family health food store. And when I would bring my sack lunch to school, it did not look like my friend's sack lunch. In fact, when I spoke at my father's funeral, I told the story of, what my lunch looked like versus everybody else's lunch, and how what was really fascinating is that I used to get teased about how weird my lunch looked, the color of the bread and all the things. And then after a little while, kids were so curious that they wanted to try the stuff in my lunch. So we started making trades, and I didn't get Twinkies at home. So I would gladly trade for a Twinkie back then. And I would trade them some healthy stuff for their junk stuff. And I had kids that were like jealous because they loved my lunches. And it was hilarious because I was jealous because they had junk in theirs. So yeah, it was an interesting upbringing for sure. I knew a lot of things that other kids didn't know, and believed a lot differently than a lot of kids did, especially when it came to health. And as such, I guess I've always been a little bit on the, more outside the box alternative side of looking at things, very, very much in large part to, how my dad raised me.
Excellent. And we're going to get to your Vital 5, right? These are the 5 key supplements that you kind of like are your bog standard things that you recommend. I just got a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Can you remember like a first product that you came to realize, hey, this is maybe not as good as you had hoped, or the marketing was stronger than the quality of the product? Is there anything that kind of pops out in your mind? It's like, oh, yeah, that happened, I don't know, whatever, back in 1983. And so I dropped that either from the store, or maybe talk about a couple of things you've decided to drop from the store.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole show on the things I've dropped from the store, but I can tell you the first really big thing that popped into my head when you asked that question. And that is, I believe it was 1990, 98-ish, 97, somewhere in that range. So, 27, 28 years ago, whatever it is. There was a big craze, one of the biggest fad crazes that's ever been around in the natural products industry. And it was called Body for Life, the old Bill Phillips book. I don't know how old you've got to be to remember that, but I anticipate some of your listeners probably know what I'm talking about. It was a New York Times bestseller. It was a fitness craze, and he was a really, really great marketer. He owned the company EAS, and he had formulated a bunch of products. His primary product was called Myoplex, and it was a protein shake, and it was designed for people to build more muscle, get better muscle recovery, and all that kind of stuff. And what was in it, as far as the active ingredients, was not bad. It was fine as far as what was in there, but it had a whole lot of junk in it, and yet it was sold primarily through health food stores, and it was always a it was always a struggle because people wanted it so bad that we were essentially compelled to carry the stuff, but it had artificial colors in it. And back then, and we're talking again a long time ago, but it was sweetened with aspartame. We know a lot more about aspartame now than we did then. So we carried the stuff, but I never felt good about selling the stuff. And yet, if we didn't carry the stuff, nobody would listen to me about alternative options because they just made the assumption that we don't sell it. So that's why we're talking up something else. But I never wanted to sell it. So the first product I ever developed was actually a product that we called Vitalplex instead of Myoplex. And we basically came out with a much cleaner and better version of this big multi-million-dollar national bestseller. And every time somebody would come in for his stuff, we would sample them our stuff. They liked the flavor better. They liked the nutrition better. And it ended up being a massive seller for us. And eventually we were able to get so big with it that we were able to completely get away from that brand and his products and still help people with all of the stuff they were trying to achieve with his workout. Because his workouts, I think, were a lot better than his products were, essentially.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And yeah, I can imagine you have, like you said, we could do a whole show just on like what you've decided to kick out of the store. That's really cool. All right. So you have a thing called Vital 5.
Yep.
It's kind of like, I think it's kind of like the Fantastic Four superhero crew, right? When did you first start kind of putting this together? Can you talk about this evolution until it became the actual Vital 5, and has anything kind of come, talk about that, and then we'll talk about what's in your Vital 5, and then we can break down why each thing is in it.
You bet. Yeah. First off, it didn't start off, I didn't have an idea to make a Vital 5. That was not my idea. It was actually my customer's idea, Vitality. I had the radio show for 12 years before I started my podcast. It was always called Vitality Radio, and it was just local radio. I was on the Utah Jazz Radio Network every Saturday morning. And the interesting thing was, because it was a radio show and I was on, it wasn't something people had to hunt for. It was something that kind of surprise attacked people when they were listening to the Jazz game the night before and then, popped in their truck and started listening to me on Saturday morning. It was never intentional. Nobody listened to my show on purpose for the longest time. And thankfully, though, apparently
you have some of your dad's characteristics, right? I don't really care why they're listening to me. I just want them to listen to me.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I hoped that people would like it once they stumbled onto it, right? But I never marketed the show. We didn't really have money to do that back then. But what happened was, slowly but surely, I cultivated a bit of an audience that started to tune in every Saturday morning because they did want to hear my show. And as such, one of the big things that I think is pretty universal with people that are interested in supplements and getting started with supplements is the overwhelm of, well, where the heck do I start, right? They could walk into a store like mine. There's almost 5,000 different products to choose from. Heck, you can go to a Costco and you've probably got 1,000 supplements that you can choose from at a big box store like that. And people don't know, do I start with a multivitamin? Do I start with omega-3? Where do I start here? And I would just universally get asked that question all the time, mostly from people who were listening to the show who weren't supplement people yet, but they were intrigued by the idea of supplements. And so, Jared, where do I start? And as I was answering that question in a very unorganized way back then, it became pretty apparent that I needed a really good answer for that question. So I started digging in and trying to figure out, what would I start with if I didn't already know what I know about supplements? And I started looking at it and decided, and of course our name is Vitality. And so vital was an easy word to use. And so then the question is, okay, what's actually vital? And essentially what I determined was I wanted to get as universal an answer as I could for people, because there is no such thing as a, be all end all for every single human. We all have different genetics and different health histories and 100 other things that make us different. But there are some things that are pretty universal, especially here in America, when it comes to deficiency. And I decided that if I was going to call it vital, then it needs to be vital, something that the body actually requires, not something that I think is good for you, but maybe isn't a necessary thing. Because there's lots of things that are good for us that we don't absolutely have to have. And then I looked at it and said, okay, well, if it's going to be vital and it's a required nutrient, then what are the nutrients that I think are the most commonly deficient in America? And I started digging in there. And that's where the Vital 5 came from. How it ended up being 5 is simply that I I just determined that there were 5 things that I considered more vital than anything else. And I also didn't want it to be overwhelming to people and have, 10 or 15 things. Nobody wants to start there anyway. So that's kind of the story there.
That's cool. And I imagine that had a really good positive impact, right? So you're doing the radio show, part of you're trying to get people to come into the store, but even as you're talking, you're in the process of overwhelming them, right? Like if they're asking lots of questions, they're already overwhelmed. But if you can kind of land on, oh, by the way, yeah, we covered all these things, but there is a Vital 5 that you probably had people coming into your store and like, I'm here for the Vital 5. And what a great marketing strategy that happens to be. Is that true? Like people like walk into the store? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And the funny thing is I never really looked at it as a marketing thing. It was just an answer to a question and it became its own animal. It now is probably what I'm known for most outside of the podcast is the Vital 5. And for years I didn't have products that I sold that were in the Vital 5. So we just kind of pieced it together from different formulas that we sold in the store that we, like the quality of. And now, of course, I have a line of Vital 5 supplements that I've formulated that I consider to be, very premium quality and that match that vital need that I talk about when I discuss the Vital 5 with people.
So we're about to get into those. So people would buy like a 5-pack. Did you guys have that at the store kind of saran wrapped together so that the saran wrap's not the right, like plastic wrapped together?
Yeah.
Well, you're trying to save money, right? It wasn't working. So a little saran wrap.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's kind of embarrassingly obvious that I should have done a lot of what I've done now sooner. When you're just running the business and you're doing everything you can to stay on top of it and also, prepping and recording a show every week. And my show back then was local radio, it was live radio. So it was a little bit more intense than a podcast because there's no editing and all that. So I had to have things a little bit more dialed in, I guess, before I and I wasn't as good at it back then either. So I spent a lot more time prepping to make sure I didn't sound like an idiot when I turned on the microphone. For the longest time, it was just kind of pieced together. It's always been the 5 things, but we've kind of tweaked it a little bit in terms of how we recommend them and that sort of thing. We can get into that in just a minute. But it was only just in the last, I'd say 4 or 5 years that I've really embraced the Vital 5, even though I came up with that concept probably close to 15 years ago and have really actually marketed it as a 5-pack of things. And we certainly have a lot of people that buy all 5. We have a lot of people that buy the 2 or 3 or 4 of the things they think are the most important, or they buy 2 or 3 from us and they have a preference with some other brand in one of the categories or whatever. So it's kind of all over the board, but it has been a really nice kind of anchoring thing for people to feel that they can be confident about starting there and that they'll see results, feel better, and be improving their health through following that.
Yeah, it really is important as a business owner to get outside perspectives, because then these things and it may have been somebody who's like, you should bundle these together. And you're like, oh my God, yes, I should have bundled them together, 15 years ago or whatever day that comes on. So it's really important to have kind of sounding boards as you're growing a business. All right, so let's jump in. What are let's list out the Vital 5 first, and then we can step through, because I know you have a lot of knowledge about each of these. Like, why did these make the list?
Okay, so the first one is maybe the most obvious one for a lot of people, and that is a great multivitamin. I always say great because in my book, almost all multivitamins on the market are definitely sub-great, and in many cases, really crappy. One of my most popular episodes of my podcast is a 2-word title, and it's just Centrum sucks with an exclamation point, because that's how I feel about that product brought to us by Pfizer. But there are, and it's the number 1 selling multivitamin in the world. And I think it's one of the crappiest multivitamins in the world, but it shows what marketing can do. So multivitamins for multivitamin's sake, in many cases, are not great ideas, but a great multivitamin is the easiest and best way to fill the most gaps in our modern American, well, really international diet. So I always start there. And then magnesium is the next one. And I have some very specific thoughts on magnesium I can share if you'd like. Probiotics are another one. Omega-3 is number, and these aren't really in any particular order. And then the last one is the one that always surprises people and that most people don't know much about, and that's digestive enzymes. And perhaps if I had to pick one, it might be my favorite of the five personally in terms of how I feel when I use those versus not using them. So those are the big five. And I also qualify my Vital Five. It wouldn't be the same for kids as it is for adults. Most kids are pumping out plenty of digestive enzymes, so that one doesn't really matter for them so much. So I tell people, for adults, this is the Vital Five that I think is as universal as I could figure out how to make it something that would benefit pretty much everybody that I talk to.
Well, let's jump in with your favorite, because I was going to ask, like, if you could only have one, it sounds like it would be digestive enzymes. Like, if you could literally only have one of the five, why? Like, why is digestive enzymes on your list? What's the value? And kind of give us the rundown.
All right. So I'm going to preface this with what I tell people. If you were to send me an email, so I didn't see you, I had no idea what your age was or your gender or your health status at all, and you said, Jared, I'm simply only willing to take one supplement, what would it be? Then that answer would actually be magnesium.
Oh, okay.
And the reason for that is because magnesium is the most common deficiency, I think, out there in America, at least in my book. Different people say different things and different studies show different things, but we know that our ancestors about 100 years ago were getting about 600 milligrams in their diet. We know now that we are getting on average of 200 to maybe 250. So we're at least a 400-ish milligrams short of magnesium. So that's number one in terms of, I think, the most universal.
Where does that shortage come from? Is that because of crops have been kind of used on the same, so the crops don't have as much magnesium in them, or is that
yeah, the food itself is depleted because the soil is so depleted.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Yep. And so just from eating, because you and I both know, and I think everybody listening to this show intuitively knows that we were made to live off of the nutrients in food. That being said, the food supply ain't what it used to be, right? And there really is, it is true that if things were as they once were when it comes to our food supply and the quality of the food supply and the potency of the nutrients in the food supply, I wouldn't have a job in the supplement industry. I don't know that there would be a supplement industry, but we have absolutely pillaged the land through monocropping and the use of things like glyphosate and 100 other things that have been done, hybridization, genetic modification, and so many other things, that it is very, very difficult to get enough magnesium along with many, many other, particularly minerals that are out there. But the other thing is our stress level is also not what it used to be. And it's interesting because when you look at our ancestors, it was a different kind of stress. These people were, living off the land. They were probably under much more physical strain than we are. I certainly don't, work a field 12 hours a day. However, right now, at any given time, I can pick up my iPhone and I can find out who's dying in what country and what country's sending the missiles over there, along with what's happening in the latest protest. I mean, as we're recording this, we've got a war going in 2 different parts of the world, and we've got protests going all over the United States. And I don't care what side you're on, there's a lot of stress involved in all of that stuff, right?
100%.
And magnesium is the primary mineral that soothes and nourishes the central nervous system and helps to calm stress and allow the muscles and the nerves to relax and manage stress. And we have what's called the magnesium burn rate. And the magnesium burn rate is at its highest when we're under the most amount of stress, meaning we're going to burn through more of our magnesium supply when we're under stress. So there isn't, really, it's those 2 things that make it as universal as it is. And that's one where I would say it applies to kids every bit as much as it applies to adults.
And so magnesium has, I think I saw in an interview you did, there's a lot of marketing around magnesium that might be misleading you in terms of the types of magnesium. I certainly have this understanding, accurate or not, that different magnesiums do different things in your system. Like there's a certain magnesium that's really good for, I think you take, I can't remember which one it is, magnesium citrate to clear out your bowel allows for a colonoscopy, right? I think so. So that's one piece. So talk about kind of the different types of magnesium, and do we need to be taking all 7 or whatever the number is?
So there are more than 7 forms for sure, although there are 7, I would say, that are kind of the most well-known, probably 4 or so that most people have at least heard of. Magnesium citrate, you mentioned magnesium glycinate or bisglycinate. Magnesium threonate is a well-known one, and probably maybe magnesium taurate or magnesium oxide to be the other ones that most people are familiar with. This comes to marketing, and marketing in the supplement industry is challenging, we'll say, for someone like myself, because
that's the word I use.
Because there was once an industry that was a bunch of people like mom and dad who were just in the industry because they loved what they sold and they loved using it themselves and they loved how they felt when they took healthy things and ate healthier food. And that's how this industry started. It was started on the backs of a whole bunch of people that were just super passionate about what that was. And frankly, none of those people that opened up those little mom and pop health food stores back in the day, none of them were looking to be millionaires. They were just looking to support their family, their local community, and educate on stuff that they were super passionate about. There was a moment, and I remember it very, very well, when the very first company in the health food industry became a billion-dollar company. And that company was GNC, the big, national supplement store that you can find in most malls across the country. And at the time, I think they had something like 5,000 locations, and they just hit $1 billion in sales. And that was this banner achievement because in this industry, nobody had ever come close to that. Now there are dozens of companies that are doing well over $1 billion now in the industry, and GNC isn't even one of the biggest companies in the industry anymore. But when that hit and people started to become really aware that there was a lot of money to be made in the marketing of natural products, the whole natural products industry started to shift, and you ended up having a combination of things. And I'll always remember this too. So there's a trade show. It's the biggest trade show in the world for natural products. It's called Expo West. It's in California every year in Anaheim. And I remember going to that show as a teenager and a young adult, and remembering that many of the executives of these health food companies and supplement companies would be outside having a smoke while we were inside looking at their natural products.
And they're healthy products.
Yeah, it became very clear to me that these people weren't necessarily, walking the walk, we'll say, right? But they certainly were talking the talk. So lots of marketing there. And with magnesium, this is one of the biggest marketing ploys that I've seen, because magnesium is now, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it's either number 3 or 4 in terms of popularity of supplements as a category in this country. We have omega-3s and we have fish oil and vitamin D, I think, are ahead of magnesium right now. But it's a big seller. And there's a company, and I'll leave their name out of this, but there's a company out there that says you need 7 kinds of magnesium. And I can tell you that is a lie, because you don't need 7 kinds of magnesium. You just need magnesium. And what you need is the magnesium to absorb as well as it can. Now, is it beneficial to have 7 types of magnesium? Potentially, because each magnesium does have a little bit different capacity inside the body. But it's not because of the magnesium, it's because of what the magnesium is bonded to. So when I was talking about Albion Labs way back when you first asked me the first question, and chelating minerals, if they're found in food, like a leaf of spinach where you could find a lot of magnesium, or at least you used to be able to find a lot of magnesium, that would be an organic source of magnesium. The body would recognize it as food. It would say, welcome in, and it gets into the cells, no problem. Magnesium, as it is now, is, essentially mined. And as it's mined, then we're putting that into a pill, and we're asking people to swallow something that is not a food, is just a single mineral. And the body doesn't recognize that mineral as food. So actually, the body, as much as it can, is actually trying to eliminate as much of that as it can and absorb as little of it as it can. And so it has to be essentially chaperoned into the party. And the way that we do that is chelating it to a protein or an acid, basically, because magnesium is a base and amino acids are acids. Typically, you're going to bond those two things together. That's a molecular bond that's formed. And that's where you get magnesium citrate, which is bonded to citric acid, or magnesium glycinate, which is bonded to the amino acid glycine, or magnesium taurate that's bonded to the amino acid taurine. And when you bond it to the mineral, bond it to the amino acid, then the amino acid escorts it into the party, like I said, gets it into the cell. But it's actually the amino acid that's with it that determines what other benefits it might have. Magnesium citrate, as you mentioned, is often used to clear the bowels, or essentially a natural laxative. And it can be used before you go for a colonoscopy, or it can be just used for someone who has constipation and needs a little assistance in that department. But the reason it functions so well in that way is because when you take magnesium with citric acid and it gets into the bowel, it creates an ionic impact in the bowel, brings a lot of water to the bowel, loosens the bowels, and then that means that you're actually absorbing a lot less of that magnesium because a lot of it's flushing out when you flush the bowel. Whereas magnesium glycinate or bisglycinate, which is my preferred form, does not have an ionic reaction in the gut, does not act like a laxative in the majority of people. Some people it still can a little bit, but in most people it doesn't. And then you can absorb a lot higher percentage of it and actually get up to that 300, 400, 500 milligram level that most of us would actually optimize our nutrition at without having that laxative effect that's sending it out the back door. So that's really important to understand. Now, why would you take, say, magnesium threonate? Well, magnesium threonate, which is bonded to the amino acid threonine, it has a propensity to cross the blood-brain barrier a little more efficiently. So it can help calm the mind for people that have kind of racing brain syndrome, like I call it, have a hard time sleeping at night, that sort of thing, or need a little better cognitive function. That being said, magnesium bisglycinate also can cross the blood-brain barrier. It's there's a question mark as to which one does it better, but it looks like threonate might be a little better than glycinate, but it's also about twice as expensive. So I usually still fall back to magnesium bisglycinate as the optimal form for the majority of people. And it's just not true that we need 7 kinds of magnesium.
Okay. Yeah. No. Okay. Well, that's good to know. It's what it's bonded to can have different impacts in the body. But like some of those impacts you may not want. So at any given time.
Yeah. And if you have a specific need, like a cardiovascular health issue, magnesium taurate is actually taurine is great for the heart. So that could be a better choice for a specific segment of the audience. But universally, the bisglycinate's where I come down on.
I think taurine just had some report that came out and says to be a little bit cautious about it. I think we could go down that rabbit hole, but I'm going to intentionally not so we can actually get through these vital 5.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
All right, so magnesium is kind of your number one, right? It wasn't listed first, but your number one. Is digestive enzymes number 2?
Yeah, so to make myself clear, because I kind of backtracked a little bit, for me, I feel the biggest difference when I take enzymes of the Vital 5. Okay. My wife also falls in that category, but not everybody does. I would say the majority of people would probably actually say magnesium just based on the feedback that we get here. And it's a little tough to know too, because I've been supplementing magnesium for, I don't even know, decades. And it was just when I hit around 40 years old that I started supplementing digestive enzymes. And it was a game changer for me when I started with it. And I tell a story, and we don't have time for me to tell it here, but my wife and I met 7 years ago, and she was dealing with a lot of health issues at the time, most of which have cleared up now as she's learned about nutrition. But one of the big ones was IBS.
That's why she selected you, because you owned the health food store. And then you're like, this guy can probably help me.
She was blindsided. Her mom's a nurse. She grew up very, very differently than I did, very medical, and I was very not medical. And she had, all she knew was pharmaceuticals, and they hadn't treated her very well over the years. And but the first time we went out on a date, she couldn't eat because her stomach hurt, and I was inquisitive. I didn't know why she wasn't eating her meal. I thought maybe she didn't like her meal, and asked her what was going on. And she said, no, when I eat, I hurt and I don't know what to do about it. And I said, well, I can help you with that. And she, this is our first date, Chris. So you got into it. So I will tell the story, but I'll make it brief. And I said, I can help you with that. And she knew I owned a health food store, but she didn't know anything about supplements. And I said, I've got a product that I formulated. It's called Back on Track, and it's digestive enzymes and probiotics, and it's got some stomach soothing herbs in it. And I bet if you take it the next time you eat, you'll feel much, much better. And she said, okay, I'll give it a shot. Now, this is one thing I always like to put out there. When you meet a guy on a dating app and he offers you pills, don't take the pills. Okay. This was a bad idea, just like my parents opening the store, but it did work out.
Well, at first I was a little disappointed that you didn't kind of open your jacket and say, I have some enzymes right here, but then that's a red flag.
That is a red flag. Yes. We actually went back to the store and got a sealed bottle, and I gave it to her, and she took it, and she texted me the next day after lunch, and she said, I can't believe this, but you're right. This is my first meal that I've eaten in years that has not caused my stomach to be upset. Wow. And it's still her favorite product. I tell people it's why she fell in love with me. Yep. And we love that product. And digestive enzymes, by the time we're about 30 to 35 years old, we're pretty woefully deficient in most cases, largely because we're eating so much processed food in America that is so devoid of enzymes. Because any kind of processed food is going to be enzyme free. Any type of cooked food is enzyme free. There aren't many people eating a lot of raw food anymore. And also we eat under a lot of stress to a very large degree in America. And when we're eating under stress, our body's not producing enzymes very efficiently at that point either, because we're in a fight or flight state rather than a rest and digest state. So when people take enzymes, gassiness, bloating, indigestion, heartburn, diarrhea, constipation, in most cases, those types of symptoms improve either significantly or dramatically or disappear, like they, for the most part, did for my wife almost right away.
Awesome. So that's kind of number two, digestive enzymes, because we have depleted enzymes and more. That one's, you were saying, not for kids, right? Because they've got plenty of enzymes.
Most kids are pumping out lots of enzymes. Yep.
Yep. And so starting maybe at around 30, you ended up starting at around 40, I think you said. Okay, so now we've got magnesium, digestive enzymes. Are the rest, hey, throw them in together, or is there any way to order those as well?
That's tough. Omega-3 technically, depending on how someone eats, doesn't need to be a supplement. If you're eating a couple of, wild Alaskan salmon fillets a week, which the vast majority of people either don't or won't afford to do, then you actually get enough omega-3 there. You don't need to supplement it, but that's not realistic, I would say, for the majority of people. And then a multivitamin. I will say this, if you eat really, really clean and you're eating primarily organic, and hopefully you're even growing a lot of your own stuff in your backyard, you're composting, you're doing all these things, you could probably get away without a multivitamin, but that's also not typical, right? And so the majority of us have gaps to fill. And then probiotics are the one that I would say it made the Vital Five because they are essential for sure. We need good bacteria in the gut and in many other parts of the body. And we are so under stress in that area because the vast majority of us have had lots of antibiotics as we've been living life, which is a nuclear bomb to the digestive tract in terms of our microbiome. But we also are being inundated with antibiotics that most people don't ever think about. I mentioned glyphosate before, which is in Roundup and is sprayed on the GMO crops almost like it's water. And it is a human antibiotic. So even if you're not taking an antibiotic, in many cases you are taking an antibiotic just indirectly through your food. And 70% of antibiotics that are produced in America, pharmaceutical antibiotics, are fed to animals, which are then fed to humans. And so we end up with antibiotics there as well. So I tell people that you don't necessarily need a probiotic daily, but you do need probiotics consistently. I usually recommend a good spore-forming probiotic at least a few months out of the year just to top off the reserve. For people with more serious issues, digestive issues, or autoimmune issues, daily is always a good idea.
How do you, so this is your own formula now, right? I think maybe at first you were using somebody else's and you've come up
Yeah.
with your own now.
Yep.
How do you, so, I mean, there's so many, the diversity of the gut biome is just off the charts, right? How do
hmm
you hone in on like, I'm going to include, by the way, how many are included in terms of different species? And then like, how do you even begin to manage that?
So this is another one that we could do multiple shows on, really. But
Yeah.
the short answer is I primarily, but not exclusively, recommend what are called spore probiotics. Spore probiotics are not human.
Mm.
We have what are called human strain probiotics. These are the ones that are native to the human digestive system. And then we have spore probiotics that are actually native to our environment. They're typically found in dirt, soil. They've found these things in salt mines that they think are millions of years old, and they're still active, which is kind of crazy. Human probiotic bacteria is not very strong. It's not, I call them a little bit wussy. When they get out of the digestive system, they're very influenced by heat. They can be killed very easily by heat. They can be killed very easily by too much moisture. They can be killed very easily by just time on the shelf.
Some by
And
oxygen, right? Like I think
oxygen.
Akkermansia, they didn't even know it existed until they were able to map the genome.
Yeah, exactly. And the other one that's a biggie is acid. And of course, the stomach has acid in it for two reasons. One is to help us digest our food, but it's also known as the acid barrier, and that's to protect us from
Mm.
pathogenic things that we might swallow, E. coli or whatever bug you want to talk about. And that stomach acid, by design, is designed to kill that stuff before it gets in and can kill us or harm us. And that, therefore, if you're taking a capsule of probiotics, human strain probiotics, there's a very good chance they're going to get killed in the stomach acid before they ever get down to where they need to be to proliferate and do their thing. Spores are very interesting because they're accustomed to a wide range of temperatures, a wide range of moisture, a wide range of oxygen, and a wide range of acid because they're found in nature where they're unprotected by the human digestive tract. So when we swallow these, they survive all the way down into the colon, and when they get there, they create two primary effects. They actually produce little metabolites that act like natural antibiotics that are very anti-pathogenic, but are very gentle on the good bacteria. So they don't wipe out the good guys, but they go after the bad guys, and they actually have antifungal properties, antibacterial properties as well. And then they also create an environment that is very conducive to the growth and proliferation of good bacteria that's in the gut. So they aren't prebiotics. They aren't food for the digestive system or for the bacteria, but they do act in that way in terms of just making it a lot easier for the good guys to grow and reproduce on their own. So the beauty of spores is if you're looking to rebuild a gut biome, I think they are the way to rebuild a gut biome. And for listeners that are wondering what the heck a spore probiotic is, if you're looking at your bottle of probiotics, you would look for one that says bacillus as the first word, Bacillus
Mm.
coagulans, Bacillus clausii, things like that. If it says lactobacillus, then it's a human strain, or if it says bifido, then it's a human strain. There's nothing wrong with those strains. They are good native strains. Well, I shouldn't say there's nothing wrong. What is wrong is they're not very strong. They don't hold up very well under stress. However, when you take those, they can actually be the very best in terms of short-term acute problem solving. If you've got a
Mm.
stomach ache right now, a human strain probiotic will work better than a spore probiotic right now. And the reason is, even though they get killed, which is technically not 100% true, they're
Mm.
actually known as lysed bacteria. When we get the lysed bacteria into the gut, that bacteria is no longer capable of colonizing, but it does deliver messages to the other bacteria and essentially rally the troops and help our gut to fight off here and now issues. So if someone's got chronic diarrhea, a human strain probiotic is going to be a better choice right now, but
Mm.
they'll never really rebuild and strengthen the gut with human strain probiotics very efficiently. The spores are really where that happens.
Okay, so that's more for kind of, like, as you said, instant signaling as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to like trying to get everything to flourish. Yeah, almost everything. I'm in the middle of reading Dr. Gundry's new book, the gut brain paradox or something, and it's just all about the gut biome. And you can take a rat that has Alzheimer's, and you take its poop and transplant it into a rat that doesn't have Alzheimer's, and it will get Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And then you can do the reverse, right? So this gut biome is so much more impactful than I think we kind of realize, and I'm excited that it's in your Vital 5, to work to address it. It's just like at some point, and this is going to have a genetic component as well. There's going to be some sort of like optimal, bacteria that you put into a gut that's optimal, and like I don't know. I think we eventually will know that, and that's kind of exciting to know that that's around the
I think
corner.
that's true. The science on this stuff is moving at like light speed right now, and everything I just said is true now. I'll probably have different answers a year from now. There's some really cool stuff happening in that field.
That's very cool. So probiotic, and again, prebiotic is what the bacteria eat. Probiotics are actually the bacteria, and you recommend a spore version so that it can get through the stomach and actually have a positive impact in the intestines. Talk about omega-3, what the importance of omega-3 and kind of how you identify, like how they're pretty sensitive is my understanding. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so omega-3 is it's interesting. It's a necessary element. We know we need more omega-3s. There's basically two parts to it. One is we're simply not getting very much in our diet right now because almost all of the fat that we're consuming in America is either vegetable fat, seed oils, and things like that don't have omega-3s at all in most cases, or animal fat that isn't fish or grass-fed beef, that kind of thing. There is some omega-3 in really, truly grass-fed and finished beef. There's a reasonably good supply there. And there's a great supply in fish. But the ocean itself is a toxic waste dump now, unfortunately. And so it's a little bit tough to decide, well, how, do I want to go out and have some halibut so I can get my omega-3? It tastes delicious if you're into fish, but what are you getting along with with your omega-3? Mercury and PCBs and who knows what else, which is why I mentioned wild Alaskan salmon. What's that?
Yeah, microplastics.
Oh yeah,
are now
lots of those too.
Now on the radar or need to be.
Yep. And really, it seems that about the last frontier is wild Alaskan salmon, which is still pretty pristine as far as a source of omega-3 in food. There are, of course, some vegetable options, flaxseed oil and chia seeds and things like that have a decent amount of omega-3, but your body has to do a lot of converting to get the right type of omega-3 out of those. So those are a little iffy. But a lot of it comes down to ratio. The majority of Americans are eating a lot of omega-6 and a little bit of omega-3. And it's estimated, depending on the researcher that you ask, that somewhere around a 2-to-1, maybe 3-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is optimal. So more omega-6 than omega-3, but the average American might be getting closer to 20-to-1, which is way off. And omega-6 is an inflammatory fat. And it's important to understand, too, that not all inflammation is bad. We want inflammation when we need it in acute cases. It's good to stub your toe and feel that inflammation. And part of that inflammation is actually part of the healing process. Chronic inflammation, though, is what kills us. And omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. So if we have a lot of omega-6, we're going to be in an inflamed state most of the time versus omega-3. And if we have a lot more omega-3 so we can balance that out, then we're going to have a lot less inflammation, at least chronically. Most of us would benefit from, well, all of us would benefit from it. Some of us have already done it, eliminating seed oils or reducing them dramatically. And when I say seed oils, pretty much almost any oil that comes from a seed or a vegetable source, most of those are thoroughly bleached and heated and degraded in so many ways in terms of processing. And even if they were really, really clean sources, they're still really high on omega-6, and we still need omega-3 to help balance those out. And supplementing it is just the easiest way to do it. So most of the research indicates that about 2,000 to 3,000 milligrams of omega-3 for most Americans per day is a really good place to be. That's not 2,000 to 3,000 milligrams of fish oil. Most fish oil supplements are only 30% omega-3. So if you look at an omega-3 that you might find on the shelf at Costco, it's going to take about 7 capsules to give you 2,000 milligrams. But there are some really good quality brands, Natural Factors. We have one at Vitality, our Vital 5. There are several other really great brands, Nordic Naturals, that have high concentration omega-3s that you can get away with 2 or 3 capsules a day to give you that full dose.
Okay, excellent. And your omega-3s, do they come from a fish source? Is this something yeah.
Yeah, ours is fish, and it goes through what's called molecular distillation. Molecular distillation removes the PCBs and mercury and microplastics and all that kind of stuff. So you get a really clean source of omega-3. And then they are the omega-3 that we use and that the really great omega-3 companies are using out there is an omega-3 that is used, or sorry, that is harvested specifically to get the omega-3. It's not a byproduct of another process. A lot of the omega-3 on the market is actually a byproduct of fish meal, stuff that they're feeding to cats or doing, who knows what with. And the omega-3 is a byproduct. And as such, oftentimes it's oxidized before it ever even gets into a capsule. So we do have to be cautious with that, because an oxidized omega-3 would actually be a negative to the body, not a positive.
Yeah. One of the things I do, I like sardines. I was turned on to them by a guy, Anthony Kunkel. He's a 2-time U.S. ultra running champion. There is no way I will ever consume as many sardines as he does. And also the crazy thing, most people, and this is certainly true of me, when he said sardines, what I heard was anchovies, right?
Oh,
so you say sardines to people and they hear anchovies, like, I can't do that. It's like, no, I said sardines. They're very different and actually quite tasty in olive oil. So I think we really kind of dug in deep. Just real quick on multivitamin, is that vitamins and are there minerals in there too? Like what are you looking to accomplish with your multivitamin? Kind of real short so we can get to our wrap-up questions.
Yeah. So the multivitamins it's a challenge because you're trying to throw as much in there as you possibly can and as few pills as you possibly can, because most of us would prefer to take less over more pills, obviously. My multivitamin is called the Ultimate Vitality Multi. It's a 3-capsule dose. You do take all 3 of those at once with breakfast, is what most people do. And what I wanted to do is give basically the highest quality in types of vitamins and minerals. So all the minerals are chelated, so they have those escorts that get them into the cells like we need them. And all of the vitamins that need to be are methylated, so they're already in the cell-ready form, so the body doesn't have to do any conversion to absorb them. And if they're not methylated, they're in whatever the current research indicates is the most easily absorbed form of that vitamin. And then the added products are really what separates the formula from most multivitamins, because there are a lot of pretty good multivitamins on the market as far as just vitamins and minerals. Our formula has a significant number of complexes. I think there's 5 different complexes outside of the vitamins and minerals. The one that I think stands out in terms of how people feel is the let's see. Let me make sure I remember what I called it here. The physical focused energy blend. And the physical focused energy blend is adaptogenic herbs that help us to mitigate stress and keep the central nervous system and the HPA axis calm and relaxed and centered. And there's a bit of a secret sauce in there that I discovered years ago that's a combination of an herb and a form of vitamin B1 called solbutamine, that we have discovered is a real incredible kick for energy that doesn't have any stimulation in it. So the majority of people that take our multivitamin actually feel a lift. They feel more energy. They feel better mental focus. And I'm always open about this. It's not really the vitamins and minerals doing it. It's that blend of things that I put together that does it as far as the energy goes. But it's nice because most people could use a little lift, and many of us are reliant on coffee or whatever our source of caffeine is that we prefer to get through the day. I think it's 90% of American adults or something like that use caffeine on a daily or near daily basis. And this is one way that we can nourish the body and get the nutrition level there that is noticeable when it comes to energy without being a stimulant.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think we covered the Vital 5. Do you feel like we missed anything in the Vital 5 here?
We missed a lot, but we got the basics. Like I said, we could go a lot of shows on that topic for sure.
No, that's very, very true. We could have spent more time on probiotics, probably more time on digestive enzymes, like they're, the variable where they come from, all sorts of stuff. Maybe we got to reconnect on another podcast. But what we're going to do now is we're going to get into our wrap-up questions. So, Jared, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
That's a funny question because I was at a longevity conference 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And they asked
Which
that
one?
question. I was at Disrupt.
Okay, I missed that one.
Yeah, it was. Let's see, where was Disrupt this year? I'm trying to remember. It was in Dallas. Yeah, it was in Dallas, and then the year before that, it was in Nashville. But anyway, fantastic show. I love it. Lots of the best researchers out there in the natural health space. And one of the speakers asked us to all close our eyes and pick a number that we want to live to. And so we're all sitting there with our eyes closed and nobody knows what anybody else is thinking, right? And we're all saying, okay, what's the number? I'm sitting here at 52 years old and wondering, okay, so how many more years do I got? We just had our fifth grandbaby, and I would love to see those kids get to adulthood, right? And I hope I get at least that far. But the number I actually picked was 120. And I did put a little bit of thought in it. He gave us about 30 seconds was all, but I gave it 30 seconds of thought. And the reason I came out with that number is not because right now in my current health status that I think I'll make it to 120, but because of what's happening right now with science and the longevity, specifically the things that we're discovering about longevity. I do think that by the time I get to my 70s or 80s, where most people are living to right now, we're going to know a whole lot more than we did, and we're going to be able to push things a lot further than we have. And I thankfully have figured out in my life how to do this without pharmaceuticals. And I tend to believe that most people, the less pharmaceuticals, the healthier the life.
Yeah. All right. So 120, how long do you believe humans can live?
That's a great question. He asked that one too. And I will say this too. That's a place that I'm starting to dig into a little bit more, is longevity, but I haven't spent a lot of time researching it. That's a hard one. I mean, I really do think that the biggest challenge with longevity right now is the environment that we live in. And we've got to clean that up one way or the other. It's estimated. I talk a lot about endocrine disruption and what's going on there. And it's estimated that if you clean up your act completely in terms of everything from how you clean your laundry to what you put on your body to moisturize it, you maybe only get rid of about 60% of that stuff, and 40% of it's airborne, and we all have to breathe. So we're going to get that. And so my hope is that guys like RFK might clean up some things. He's an environmental lawyer. He knows what that stuff is, and he made some promises. So we'll see how he comes through as far as that stuff goes. And so that we actually do clean up our act as a country and as a world. But if it's left to us and we can educate ourselves and figure this out, I think, 150 is a thing. I think if we cleaned up the environment, it could certainly be a lot longer than that.
I like that. All right. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets? Let's call them shortcuts, really, because everyone likes shortcuts, to longevity and a long health span that you would share?
I'll share this one with you because I don't ever hear anybody talking about it, and I think it's really important. I have a whole podcast episode on this that I personally think is just absolutely fascinating in terms of the information contained in there, and it's a single word, and that's curiosity. I believe that if we get curious about how we are living our lives, why we do the things we do, positive things, negative things, whatever, what are our subconscious motivations for those things, then we learn so much about ourselves. And as we start to learn about ourselves, we get to take control of our lives, and we start to recognize that the stress that is external, that is coming at us on a regular basis, doesn't have to necessarily impact us in a negative way. We as human beings tend to allow a lot of outside forces to dictate a whole lot about how we live our lives, how we feel, whether or not we're happy or sad, whether or not we're depressed or anxious, or energized and feeling good. And I personally, myself and my wife, both, we've worked on a lot of mindset stuff over the last several years that we've known each other. We've worked a lot on curiosity. We ask ourselves and we ask each other all the time, why did we do that? Or why didn't we do this? And what's actually behind that decision? Because I really don't believe in right or wrong, but I do, because the wrong decision, like opening up a health food store in 1977, could work out really, really well, right? And had the store,
a 15-year-old in charge of it shortly thereafter.
Exactly. And had the store folded, they had the opportunity to learn a lot from that mistake, right? Quote
Yeah.
unquote. And so I don't really subscribe to right and wrong anymore, good or bad even. I do believe in good and evil. I think there's that out there. But as far as good and bad, right and wrong, if you make the decision that comes with the consequence that hurts, that pain can teach us so many lessons. So as we get curious about these things, we, as I said, we gain more control. And I think as we do that, we calm ourselves down in a significant way. And as we're not living on the edge of our seats, always with muscles tensed and stressed and wondering where the next catastrophe is going to come from, I think that is a massive answer to longevity.
Okay, so that's one. Let's do one or two more. So you got curiosity, and by the way, I love that one. What are maybe two other habits, shortcuts that you would share for longevity and a long health span?
Nature. You got to get outside. We're glued to a floor, not the ground. We're glued to screens and not the sky. There's so many things. I mean, you and I, Chris, are sitting here looking at each other from a screen. I don't even know what city you're in. And here we are having this conversation. And it's been a fascinating conversation. And I love that we have this technology. It's so cool, right? But
Yeah.
it doesn't substitute for actually getting outside, soaking up the sun, hearing the sounds of nature. My beautiful wife is this nature freak in the best way. Last night I came home from work and she was out on the front porch watching the sunset and listening to piano music as she listened to the birds chirp. And that is healing. That is beautiful. And we've got to get more of that in our lives.
Excellent. All right. What are one to two things people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
I think that probably the thing I would pick on the most would have to be what's the word? Health through science, I guess. And what I mean by that is pharmacy. It's interesting when we look at how we live to 80 years old in America, it's not the best way to live to 80 years old, at least not in my view. The average American over 70 years old, I think, is on about 7 different pharmaceuticals that are, at least in theory, keeping them alive. But when we look at pharmaceuticals and we look at long-term use of pharmaceuticals, we almost always see significant negatives that come from these things. And so quality of life isn't great. And so if we can get to the point, and I think we're in a spot right now, Chris, I'd be curious your opinion on this, where there's such a seismic shift happening right now that people my parents' age, a little bit older than them and a little bit younger than them, they were in that group, my parents not so much, but they were in that group that pretty much just did what the guy in the white coat told them to do. And they offloaded their health to a so-called expert. Now, some guys in white coats are really, really expert, and they really are good at what they do. Others, maybe not so much. And I believe that it behooves all of us to take charge of our health. If you fire your car mechanic because you think he's not giving you a good deal, or every time he makes a fix, it doesn't work, then you ought to probably consider that with your doctor if he's also not doing that for you as well. There are great people practicing medicine in this world, but medicine as a system, I think, is largely broken.
So the thing they're doing wrong is just turning over their health without discretion to a lab coat.
And just taking their word for it. Many people don't even get a second opinion, and that's something that doctors used to recommend all the time. We don't hear it as much anymore, I don't think. But yeah, get that second opinion. Find out if what this guy or that gal is telling you is actually valid. And now we live in this world where we have podcasts like yours, podcasts like mine, this incredible, crazy thing called the internet, where we can actually pretty easily research these things. Do some research, take charge, you be the boss of your health. I think that's huge.
Excellent. And Jared, how can people contact you?
The easiest way to find me is on, I guess either the podcast if they're looking to listen to more of me speaking, for sure. Vitality Radio Podcast. We're on all the podcast apps. You can find us on Instagram at Vitality Nutrition Bountiful is our main Instagram page. And then you can always jump on our website, which is vitalitynutrition.com. Some things that people like about how we do things. We were a mom and pop store. We are still a mom and pop store. My wife and I own it. We have 3 of our kids and a niece that work here, and we love what we do. And we're still an independent little guy out there, hopefully doing good work in this world. You can call us at 801-292-6662 and talk to a real human being and ask your questions. You can also jump on our website and open up a chat, and it's either going to be me or my son that answers that chat.
Oh, wow. That's very cool. And what in the near future are you excited about?
So many things, but I'll say probably if I had to pick one right now, because we already talked about it, the research on the microbiome and what's coming next. There is so much awesomeness in that. And as we recognize that we're far more bacteria than we actually are human, we need to understand the bacteria a whole lot better than we do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Jared, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris. It was a real pleasure. I appreciate you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.